Welcome, beauties, to episode 4 of Aesthetic Chat with Kiki. I'm your host, Kiana Gamble, and I'm so excited to have this next guest on. I have Tawnie Steiger here on the podcast with me today. She has been injecting about 10 years. She is the owner of Habitual Beauty Aesthetics in Federal Way, Washington. So enjoy, beauties. I'm good. How are you?
Good, girl.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to, come onto the podcast. All right. Well, let's get started. So,
Awesome.
welcome to Aesthetic Chat with Kiki. So happy to have you on, Tawnie. I want you to start by talking about, your journey, your story, kind of how you got into nursing, got into aesthetics, and then, kind of got to where you are today, owning your own practice.
Yeah, thank you. So, gosh, even from the very beginning, just getting into nursing, I would say has all just come super, super organically. And like when I step back and look at where things have gone, just so meant to be. I didn't grow up even knowing I wanted to be a nurse. That came later. I thought I was going to live my best life working on the business side of Nordstrom. And I did like the Nordstrom sales and all that for forever. And then one day I realized that just wasn't for me. And my girlfriend was in nursing school and she's like, you should do this. You would love it. So kind of got into nursing that way. I started in the emergency department and loved that. It was a 2009. So it was a busy time of nursing and did that for a couple years. And with those skills, I started then working at a plastic surgery office. And doing circulating and recovering. And it was really there that it was just one plastic surgeon. And I had at that point transitioned into helping him in the clinic, and he was doing his own injections just kind of casually. And he was like, I feel like nurses are starting to do this now. Would you want to inject? And I was like, what? Sure. And from that moment on, it just clicked that was everything I wanted in just one role. I loved the emergency department, but I hated the lack of getting to build a relationship with somebody, because of course in the emergency department, hopefully you don't get to know your patient all that well for that long and see them often. And then even in the plastic surgery, I enjoyed finally getting to know people a little bit more. But again, they get their surgery and they're kind of done. And so this was really the light bulb for me that allowed me to be a nurse and use my brain in that way, but also just finally get to have that relational side again and get to know people and see people every, 3 to 4 months. So that was kind of how it started. It was very like pre-Instagram anything. And looking back, I always tell my new patients in consultations, thank goodness the industry has evolved so much, because to be fair, what I was taught and learned back then is so different than what we would ever do now. And so I'm just grateful that's why I'm so always love learning, because I'm sure some things we do today we'll look back and think, oh, I'm glad we've moved on from that. So,
Right.
So yeah.
So, how many years have you actually been injecting then? So what year did you start?
I've been injecting for about 10 years. Now, some of that was not full time. And so, and then like in my second location that I injected under a different plastic surgeon, my scope was pretty tight. It was pretty limited. And so I got really good at kind of on-label injections, but got really good at referring people out too. I would say, to be really transparent, during a couple of years of that, I didn't feel like my career as an injector, skill set wise, grew a lot. I think because I was kind of limited in that way, I think in that point, even still, it was early in this aesthetic side of education. There wasn't a lot of talk about education back then. It was like you did your kind of initial Allergan or whoever, training, on label training, and then you kind of were told to go do it. But there wasn't a lot of even other injectors and colleagues offering trainings on their own, or there was zero talk of anatomy and cadaver. So I think I love how much it's grown in that side, because I think it's allowing people that get into this to really flourish at a lot quicker pace, which is great. But yeah, so overall, I mean, I've been injecting about 10 years. I wasn't allowed to have an Instagram until my last office, like 3 years ago. So that's been a game changer for our industry as well, for sure.
How long were you like part-time injecting, and then how many years, or like what was the time frame between like getting into aesthetics and going from part-time to full-time and, getting that full schedule?
Yeah, good question. So I would definitely I would say injecting part-time until about 2018, because I was maybe a little bit before, maybe 2017, because I was kind of splitting time in the plastic surgery office doing circulating and recovery and clinic duties, and then scheduling my own injectable patients around that. So
Gotcha.
it wasn't necessarily full time. The last year I was at the plastic surgery office, we kind of transitioned into, I said, like, I need full time at this. This takes full time effort and work to build an actual, practice. And so that last year I went to full time, but yeah, I would say it was fairly part time. While I could, I wanted to do as much as possible, along with the other duties that I had there.
Nice. So you own Habitual Beauty Aesthetics. What kind of made you go from, working under a plastic surgeon to kind of going that route of opening your own practice and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So just like my beginning, this kind of came really organically too. After the plastic surgeon's office that I worked at in Seattle, I then went to work at a med spa under a physician there. She was not a plastic surgeon, but a physician there who had a great med spa. And to be fair, I was planning on being there longer. She was really great in the sense that I had my own room and I had a lot of autonomy and was able to start my Instagram and kind of really build and dedicate full time for my clientele there. Things happen, and it just was clear that that was not going to be where I was going to continue working. And so it was kind of this crossroads where I thought, okay, so I wasn't planning on leaving at this moment, but I am going to now. So do I go work at another office, or should I start my own thing? And my husband was really supportive in that decision as well. And he's like, babe, just do it. Like, you're going to do it eventually. Like, just do it now. And so it came together really quickly. It was like maybe an 8-week
Oh, wow.
from the time I
8 weeks?
decided to opening. Yeah, girl, I didn't have a name. I didn't have anything.
You're just like, let's do it.
I was like, I guess we're doing it. It was crazy. But in hindsight, it's, I say out of the chaos comes, beauty. And it's been so amazing. And I'm so grateful for doing it now. It's awesome.
That's awesome. So I guess what kind of things did you run into in terms of trying to open up your own place? Like, any advice for people that are eventually wanting to own their own practice as well?
Yeah, I think so. Since I've opened, I have only been open since June, and I think I feel grateful for kind of my journey has been longer than some, because, as I just said, I mean, for a lot of it, I was only injecting part-time and had some limitations. But at the end of the day, the time that I opened, I had a pretty steady clientele, and it was a pretty seamless transition. They just ended up going to a different location to see me, But since I've been open, I've been having quite a few injectors come and shadow, and a lot of them are new. Maybe some of them aren't currently working yet, and several of them are opening their own thing. And my biggest advice that I would say for an injector that's opening their own place, especially if you're really just starting out, I think knowing that you can do really well with just injections. I think sometimes it's easy to compare what other practices are doing and get overwhelmed and want to add all the things at once. And I say, don't overwhelm yourself. Just, you have your hands, you have your injections, and just really focus on those. I think focusing on building those relationships with those patients will pay off in the end. It might be slower at the beginning, but if you can invest that time with each patient that comes through your door, they'll be yours forever, and so while you're new and opening, take that time and invest in each person, like as a person, not what they can give to you, but how you can, better their life and be a friend to them.
That's great advice. Really great advice.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, since you've been in the industry, you said over 10 years now, starting out versus now, do you feel like the industry is more collaborative, or do you find it still more on like the competitive side?
Yeah, I would say I think there's a little of all of it, to be fair. And I think what you'll feel inside is really what you'll feel the strongest about is where your heart is. I think that, meaning when I first started, I didn't feel there was much collaboration at all. But again, I wasn't part of Instagram was only just starting to become a thing. And I think that for me personally, especially overall being a solo provider, for a lot of my career, it felt very solo, and maybe you saw some other of your colleagues or peers at, like I said, like a local, brand dinner or something. But even like I didn't go to a lot of conferences back then. There wasn't a lot of conferences. Like if you look at the big conferences, often they're either just started or they're only a couple years old. So a lot of that to really encourage collaboration is fairly new in this industry. I would say for me, I think that I feel grateful in my area. I work you're in Washington, but especially in this Western Washington side, we have a lot of amazing injectors over here. And I'm grateful that I feel like we all really support each other. I know all of us, if a patient lives further down the road and it would be more, make more sense for them to see one of my colleagues that's closer to them, I'm always going to recommend that. And so I think we all do that for each other, and that feels super collaborative. I think that utilizing Instagram, while it can feel like you're an outsider looking in, I think you also, if you are willing to kind of put in some work and be a little vulnerable, you can make relationships with other people online that are really authentic and genuine and really provide a lot of value to you in terms of support and collaboration. You don't need 100, BFFs on Instagram, but have a couple that are in a similar spot that you are, that sometimes you just need that person to message at the end of your workday and be like, holy cow, what a day. Like this happened. And it's just a great safe space to collaborate and vent and grow with other injectors alongside you. But you have to kind of put in that vulnerability to put yourself out there too. I think going back to what I said, when it depends on how you feel, I just think that I have seen some of that more maybe nasty competitive side, but I feel grateful that overall I just try to, if I sense that, I kind of move on from that person or that group. And that's just not where I'm coming from. When I feel or see people get really possessive of what they do, or maybe it's just not my vibe, I just kind of let it go and move on from that. I don't try to sit in it or be part of it, or to me, there truly, truly is more than enough patience for all of us to see. I always say, truly, if somebody were to open up a business right across from me, I would be like, great, another cool person that maybe we can collaborate and work together. I don't, when I have people come and train, I could teach them exactly what I do, but at the end of the day, it's up to the patient to choose who they want to see. And maybe they just vibe better with that other person. And then that's great. It's not negative to me if somebody chooses to go see somebody else, that's just where I come from. So I don't sense a lot of the negativity on social media or in our industry, but I think I just really try not to surround myself with that either,
Right. Honestly, that's really nice to hear. I did the same when I was trying to get into the industry. I found other injectors that were kind of in that same, like, very new stage. And I think that really helped me a lot because, I hope that like the collaboration portion is like where the entire industry is going, because it's just nice to hear that you can kind of, step back from that. And if that is happening, you're just like, I'm not going to associate myself which is always
Yeah,
great.
there's enough positivity out there that there's no reason to get bogged down with anything less than that, And yeah, like you said, just being in a similar like time of your career with injectors is great, and sprinkling in some people that are in maybe different parts of their career is great, because all of these perspectives, help us in the end. I always say, if truly why we're getting into this industry, we have to remember we're healthcare providers at the root of everything, right? We're trying to help people. So at the end of the day, if the goal is to help a person, whether that's help them look better, feel better, then who cares where you get that advice from, or who they're going to see to feel better. We should just want them to feel better, right? So I think sometimes this industry, we lose sight of that, the root of what we do. We're healthcare providers and help people. So there shouldn't be any, jealousy or fighting or competition over who gets which patients,
For sure. I love that you said that there's enough patients to go around. Like, it's not, you're
more
kind
than
of picking
enough.
out of my sandbox,
Yes, totally.
So my next question for you is, how do you seek out continued education, and like, what do you look for in a training now that, you're an established injector with your own practice? Like, how are you staying up to date and, learning the newest of new?
Yeah, I think that, again, in just even the recent years, there's becoming more and more and more opportunities for education, which is really awesome and amazing. I think for me personally, and what I recommend to other people when they're thinking about trainings, I think it's kind of it always, whenever there's any kind of training, whether it's small or big or dinner, I know all of us, if we see our friends and colleagues at it at social media, I mean, it's like the biggest level of FOMO ever, because you're like, dang, I want to be there. That looks amazing. They're learning all the things and they're having the best time. But I also say, unfortunately, most of us don't have unlimited funds for training. So in the real world, we have to kind of pause for a moment and figure out, okay, what makes sense for me? And I think throughout your career and year by year, this will change on what your focus is. But I think, have a focus, an intention, at least even that year or that quarter. What is it that you actually want to gain? What do you want to learn? Where do you feel you could grow? And then align your trainings to meet that, for example, in 2019, and I just remember because it was like the year before everything, I was really focusing on kind of under eye, tear trough, what is the best way and what's everybody doing. And so I went to some specific conferences based on that. At that time, actually, Aesthetic Next and iSpan were happening, I think either at the same time or right overlapping. And I was like, oh, I want to go to both. It feels like everyone's going to, Aesthetic Next. I think that was their first year. But iSpan, to be fair, had a lot of discussion boards and keynote speakers on tear troughs and what's the best way to treat under eye. And again, with iSpan, there was a mix of plastic surgeons in there and everything. So for me, that's what made me decide that one, because that was my focus that year. And I really wanted to absorb and learn as much as I could about that area and that treatment. So that's sometimes how I pick. I also think, again, the big conferences are always fun and they always sprinkle a lot of good information in one weekend. But in terms of direct change in your injections or having, a smaller group setting where somebody's actually can help guide your hand, or again, you're maybe only in a group of 2 to 6 people, you get something totally different out of those, even if it's a 4-hour private training. So sometimes I think there needs to be a good balance of having some private trainings, likely off label, where you can really ask anything you want and really elevate your practice, as well as some of the, maybe more fun weekend big conferences. So they're two very different, I think, things out of them. I always just say you go into whatever sort of training it is, whether it's a dinner and someone speaking, whether it's a one-on-one or, private training or a big conference. And I always say, I just want to leave with 3 pearls, and sometimes that pearl might not even have to do with injecting itself. It could be, wow, I love the way they phrased that. I want to kind of implement that into the way I say something. Or that was such a great way they do their flow there. I love the way their office does that, and that makes it a special thing for the patient. It doesn't even have to be injecting, but I think if you can go into anything and just say, I want to take 3 pearls, then that's a success for sure.
I love that. The three pearls thing. I feel like that's an attainable goal, and that even if you say you don't learn something about injecting, you could learn something about the art of consultation, or
Totally.
just
Exactly.
a little pearl that, yeah, like you said, the clinic
Yeah,
provides,
exactly. There's always something that you can take away. Because sometimes when people go to enough trainings, I know sometimes people are like, well, I already heard that. Or I'm already doing that. And I always say, okay, but shift the perspective and like seek out just something different that you could take away from it.
Right. So do you have a favorite conference that you like to attend, like each year or kind of every other year, anything like that?
No, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I would say I can speak on the ones, the one that I've been to. Like AmSpa is great for, I think especially newer providers and especially newer business providers, because in one weekend you can get a lot of value on all sides of injecting. Because even if you're in the umbrella of a bigger practice, I think to be fair and, Kenny, you're a great example of this is, you're still building who you are. You're still building your brand. You might work somewhere, but it's still you that people come to see. And so I always say, even if you don't own your own practice, you're still an entrepreneur of yourself, of what you do, and so they have some
Sure.
great business sides to it. They have injection track. They have even a social media track. So, I know conferences like that and Aesthetic Next kind of went that route as well, which it gives you a lot in one weekend in different aspects of what we do. I think often us as a successful provider, like you said, we do a little of all of that. We do social media, we do injecting, and we have some business side to it, and so those ones are really great. iSpan was definitely great. And like I said, it was very educational and just a lot of different speakers that aren't often at just the sole aesthetic ones. So that was kind of fun to meet and see some different and hear some different opinions on things. And the palette courses are awesome too. I don't know. Have you ever done one of those?
Yes, that's how I kind of got introduced to. So Haley Wood was my last
Yeah.
guest on here,
Yeah.
and I've taken a lot of really great courses for like a decent price. They're not too bad, and you can
Right.
learn a lot from just watching someone else inject. So I've really, really enjoyed those. And I tell a lot of people, like, if you're looking for something that's not too expensive, but like
Right.
you'll learn a lot, like Palette's definitely the place to go.
Yeah, Palette's awesome. And yeah, I really love Palette. Unfortunately, in Seattle here, we haven't gotten back to our like in-person ones, but even, then they adapted and shifted to some virtuals, which to be fair, you can only do so much virtual, but still great
Right.
value. And again, even just watching virtual, you can for sure take some pearls away from that. And so palettes are great, as like you said, in terms of value, and then they always have the best people. You can't go wrong with any person that Palette is putting up on there. So yeah.
For sure. So in terms of like the person trying to get into injecting, would you recommend more of like a small, like intimate class, and then maybe save the conferences for once you're like in a place and more established, and then you can focus more on like your brand and like, refinement and all that stuff?
Yeah, I think so. That's, like I said, for the people I've come in shadow, a couple of them, I just said, of course, do whatever you want. And again, if you have, unlimited funds, and it's never a bad weekend to go to these big ones. However, I think in terms of direct, immediate value to you growing as an injector, if you're just getting into it, and these big ones, particularly if you're a solo provider and you don't have anyone to go with, I think it would probably be fairly overwhelming because they're often pretty big and there's just a lot going on. And so I think in terms of value and being able to do a private training, or at least a smaller group hands-on training, you're going to get so much out of that you can immediately begin translating into your practice. Where, the bigger conferences, they're often not going to have hands-on. So it's a lot of watching and learning, but I think it would be more valuable once you get at least a little bit of time injecting.
Right. So I guess my like fun question for you is what is your ideal patient to inject, or like your favorite patient to inject?
Oh my gosh. I feel like that's like basically all my patients. I think that what I've seen change, and what, again, I'm so grateful to social media for, Instagram for, is because I think over the years, these patients have the ability to learn a little bit more about what we do. And for us to be able to show our work on Instagram, it gives them a better idea of what these injections are. You know, again, when I first started, it was like injections. That means someone does their lips and someone does frozen Botox, you know, and that's kind of all someone might know of it. And so maybe the person came in that noticed, okay, maybe you can do it a little bit more artistically, but really that's all that was shown of it. Now we can show these beautiful full face before and afters, and we can provide education. And so I think it's that patient that does their research in terms of, not that they're coming in and asking you, are you using this brand or that brand? I mean, to be fair, I think that part doesn't really matter much. It's about trusting them, the patient that does their work, researches enough injectors that feels a connection to one and is ready to move forward. And at that point, they're kind of like, I love everything you do. I feel a connection to you. Do whatever you think is going to look the best, you know? And that doesn't even mean like, oh, the person that spends a lot. It's not that. It's just that person that has that trust with you, you know, and that you immediately feel comfortable with them and they feel comfortable with you. And to me, I think that's a perfect patient, the patient that they just trust you. And I think, again, as a provider, part of utilizing our social media is to help build that trust. I mean, I always say when I meet new patients, like, let me tell you a little bit about me and all this, because to be fair, it's pretty vulnerable to never meet somebody. And then like 8 minutes later, they're poking needles in your face and, you know, and it's your
Very
face.
true.
And all things. So I respect and don't take lightly the trust that patients give to us providers. But I think, you know, they often, my new patients that come to me, they've kind of seen what I can do. And at that point, they know I'm not going to give them duck lips because I don't have that on my page, you know, like they just know that they have the vibe. We are on the same aesthetic page, and that they're like, just do it, you know, whatever you think, just do it. I'm not trying to convince anybody to do anything because they've already done their research.
So my question for you is, how do you get all of these patients that are just like this, I guess? Is it just, like you'd said, Instagram and, you know, like feeling like they built that connection with you? That's awesome. That,
I think
you know,
so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, to be transparent, I mean, I'm not like one of these injectors that my books aren't closed through next year. I mean, you could probably come in a couple weeks. You know what I mean? Like I don't have, it's not like that. It's just, yeah, I think slow and steady, you know, like I said, I started my Instagram, 3 years ago, I think it was, and it was quite slow, you know, at first. It's just slow. And what I tell new injectors too is, it's easy to get caught up in the game of Instagram and the numbers and the this and that. And I just say, again, just pause for a moment and remind yourself, what is the whole point of me even having this page? Is my page so that, you know, random people in Europe and New York are going to follow it and like it? I mean, maybe that's your intention. I said, but my intention is that just somebody local sees it and then they feel connection to it. They feel good about moving forward. And then at the end, they're sitting in my chair, you know, and often I use my Instagram a lot in my consultations just to even show, okay, this is what I'm talking about for this. And this, and like, I saw that, you know, and I think using your Instagram to build that connection and to showcase what you can do. And then, like I said, when you build those connections with your patients, and they sense that it was a different experience than maybe they've had with another provider, or it just felt like a great experience. If it was their first time, they will tell their friend, you know, and it's really organic. And we all know, especially as women, if a girlfriend tells you, go to her, she's great, or you'll like her, then you're like, cool, I don't even have to look anymore. Like she likes her, I'll love her, you know? And so I think, you know, just taking the time though, what I often find is people, even if they've had treatments for years, the thing that they remark about is that just no one spent much time with them, you know, and they're like, I mean, she did a great job, but she just didn't spend, just did it, and I don't know why or what, but I mean, it was fine. And I
Right.
tell, new providers, like, this is your opportunity. To be fair, if you're brand new, you probably don't have 50 patients in one day. You're like, yeah, I have 3. Great. But maximize each one, because you have this time to spend with them, and that's what keeps someone coming back to you. That's how they don't get lured by a cheaper price somewhere else, because they're like, yeah, it's cheaper, but I just really love going to her. Like, at this point, I made a connection. We're BFFs, and I want to stay going to her. And that's where this relational side of what we do comes into play. I always say we can have the most amazing techniques and be the most technical, advanced, and amazing injector ever. But if you don't have a connection, if you don't take time to get to know people, they're either not going to come, or they're going to go somewhere else where maybe they're cheaper, maybe they're nicer, or maybe, I mean, this is it's this career that we've chosen. It's, as the most rewarding thing ever, but you have to invest yourself into it too. You can't just think people are going to invest in you. It's a two-way street for sure. And so getting to know people and spending that time with them, I think goes so far, I guess.
Oh, great advice. Love that. So are you a one-woman show at your practice? Is it just you injecting and all of it, or do you have other staff?
Yeah, I'm the only injector. I was planning to be 100% solo when I first opened June 1st. And then by June 15th, I was like, all right, this is kind of a lot. Because I'd have to leave my door half open, and then UPS would be dropping stuff off. And I felt like it was a little frazzled. So I actually it's so fun. I have my sister, and she does my patient care coordinator. She does my reception up front. And so people get both of us when they come in. So it's kind of fun. So she helps me check them out and does my phone calls and is just there. And I get to hang with her all day. So, yep. But otherwise, just me and her. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on to the podcast. Where can people, reach out to you, message you for potential shadowing, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So the easiest and best is probably via my Instagram. It's a little lengthy. It's aesthetic.injector.tawnie. Just typing in Tawnie, Tawnie, is probably the quickest way to find it on there. And then and so you can DM and email about shadowing opportunities and everything. And then my business one is at Habitual Beauty Aesthetics. And my practice is in Federal Way, Washington.
Perfect. Well, I will send all my listeners your way. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to, come on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
Again, thank you, Tawnie, for taking the time to record with me today. You had a lot of great little pearls to share with my listeners, and I just had the best time chatting with you. So remember, if you want to hear updates on when next podcast episodes are launching, follow the podcast Instagram, which is at aesthetic.chatwithkiki. My personal aesthetic Instagram is at aestheticnurse.kiki. And you can also listen to episodes streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or directly on my website, aestheticnursekiki.com. So until next time, beauties, bye.